and then we will go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you all to the August 2021 University of Texas Speaker Series. We have Nick O'Day with us. Nick is the Chief Data Officer for the city of Johns Creek in Georgia. As most of you all know, they've had some award-winning open data portals, creating first Alexa skills, call center, chatbots, incorporating and partnering with Waze. So this is going to be a really great presentation, and selling the value of GIS is the presentation title. So Nick, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. We really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Brian. And thanks everybody for attending. Hopefully you'll walk away with a little bit of some nuggets of hard-earned knowledge that we've been able to collect over here in Johns Creek. So yeah, this is selling the value of GIS, or as I like to call it, how to get big projects moving, because that's really what it's all about, right? Getting the projects that you want done, and not just getting them done, but getting them done really well. So a little bit deeper about my background, just to kind of prove that I'm one of you guys. I started in GIS back in 2002, working for the University of Georgia. And at the time, I was doing a lot of water quality research and supporting land use research that was done with the USDA. And then kind of worked my way through from there to different local governments in the area of Atlanta. And then I was a consultant for a while. And that's how I found Johns Creek. So Johns Creek was one of my first consulting gigs, consulting clients. We had them with the company that I used to work for 5 years before the city said, okay, we want to get rid of all the consultants, but we want to insource you guys. And so, that made the company really happy. But that's where I've been ever since. So all told, I've been with Johns Creek in some form or capacity for almost 11 years. The first 5 of those, like I said, was as a consultant, and the last almost 6 have been as chief data officer. And so since we have such a small staff, my role, even though my title is CDO, it really is GIS manager plus anything else that has to do with data, whether or not it's geospatial in nature or not. So there you have it. And really the thing that I've learned across all these different organizations and different companies and stuff is that everybody, regardless of who you are, if you're a private company or a public safety agency or a local government, everybody wants to save stuff, right? They want to save money, they want to save time, they want to save effort, and they also simultaneously want to deliver better products to more people. So if you're a government, you want to, deliver better, faster services to more citizens, but you want to do it at the same time, for less money. You want to do it faster, and you want to do it either with less staff or less effort from the staff. And it's the same thing for all these other organizations, right? Everybody's trying to do more with less. And the problem that we get into is, okay, how do we do that, right? It's great that these executives come up and say, we're going to do more with less, it's government 2.0 or something, but there's not really a roadmap on how to do those things. There are some places that do some projects really well, and they kind of lend themselves to support this narrative that everything can just be done magically with less resources. It makes everybody better and leaner. But there's not really, like I said, a roadmap or a guidebook that anybody's really developed. So how do we get there? Well, of course, since we're all GIS people, my answer is GIS is the way to get there, right? To this magical place where we're delivering everything to everybody all the time, and nobody has to wait. But the beauty about GIS, as you already know, is that it deals with so many different aspects of an operation, right? It's not just the where, but it's also the what, and all the different characteristics of what we're actually doing, and when are things happening, and how are they happening? Is it a plane that's moving something? Is it, field crews that are going out and surveying? Really, it's the one foundational technology that I've found over the last 20 years of my career that really brings everything together in a way that is easy to understand. But the problem with GIS, if there is a problem, is that very few people really get it, right? So you get into these situations where you come up with an idea and you want to try to share it with people, whether it's a decision maker or your fellow, employees that might not be in GIS, and you have to kind of explain what it is and make sure that they understand what it is first. And then you can get to the part where you're like, okay, now that you get what I'm saying, let me tell you about this cool thing we could do with it. So, if the pandemic has unequivocally been a crappy experience for everybody, right? The one thing that it seemed to have done is it really elevated the power of GIS. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I turned on the news over the last 18 months, and I've seen either the Johns Hopkins dashboard, that lists the COVID cases and stuff, or some other dashboard that emulates that. And that's the nice thing, that once you show people an example of what GIS is, then they get it. But the next step to that is that most people don't extrapolate and go, okay, just because there's a dashboard that shows COVID cases, I wonder what my city would look like if we looked at potholes. Nobody kind of extrapolates or takes it to the next level. And that's where we get to the meat of the presentation today, where you really have to be able to sell the ideas of GIS. And so the problem with selling, especially to people that have not gone to business school like me, is that you get a picture of this guy, right? He's got a lot of passion. He's got all these great ideas, but he's really intense, right? Like, this is GIS, you must love it. That's a little too much. The passion is good, but the delivery is not so good. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got this guy who's begging and pleading. And while we all feel like this once in a while when we're talking to our bosses, please just let me put this dashboard together because you don't understand, but it's going to change your life. It comes off a little too much. This might help you win, Renee Zellweger's heart, but it's probably not going to help you sell your GIS project to the masses, and especially won't help you sell it to an executive or a director or something. So what we're really looking for is a balance between the two. You want the passion, but you don't want to come off as being needy, just like in a relationship. Not that I'd have any experience with doing that, right? So, when we typically think of selling, you think of, I have something you want, you want it, you come to me and buy it, right? And the easiest analogy that I could come up with is car salesman. And so, the nice thing here is everybody understands what a car is, right? The car salesman wants to sell you a car for the most amount of money that he or she can sell it to you for. And on the other end of that spectrum, the customer wants to buy the car from you for the least amount of money possible. So there's not any need to discuss, what the car is or the concept of a car. Hey, it's this box that has wheels and a motor and it can take you places. Like, everybody gets that already. So it's not a hard thing to do. But again, in GIS, we're not selling physical objects necessarily. We're selling an idea or a concept. And that's where the difficulty comes into play. So really what I found is there are three basic steps to selling GIS, right? So there's the first step of building rapport with your customers, with your fellow employees, whoever it is, they need to be able to know who you are and trust you. Then the second part is figuring out the right people to target, and also leveraging the tools that you have at your disposal. So it's really a matter of figuring out how you fit into your organization and how to best maneuver, your GIS through the different, potholes that might appear in front of you. And then, of course, the last thing here is that when you're talking about selling GIS, you have to show the benefits. You can't just say, hey, this is really cool because it's going to look awesome. You have to say, we're investing this time and energy and sometimes money to be able to do this. It's going to, lower our response times, or it's going to whatever. There's got to be some kind of quantifiable thing at the end. You don't necessarily need to know what that number is going to be. You just need to know that there are going to be benefits on the flip side. And so if we dig a little bit deeper, really building rapport boils down to, if people know who you are, they're more likely to say yes to you. And so that all starts out with just doing the basic GIS work that we're all trained to do, right? Making the maps, editing the data, putting things together. If people are happy with that level of support that you're providing them, then it's a lot easier to say, hey, we're doing this base level. We can take it to the next level if you just give me the go ahead or the resources or what have you. And of course, while you're trying to build that base level of service to your customers, to your clients, whoever they are, I found that the way to build rapport even quicker than just doing your job is to do your job and then add a little extra, right? So if somebody comes to you and says, hey, can you give me a map of all the car crashes in the city or in our county? Sure. You can just do what they ask you to do and move on, or you can give them, what they asked for, plus maybe a spreadsheet that has, the major intersections where these car crashes happen, just a little extra to kind of say, yeah, this is what you asked for, but there's a lot more that we could do beyond just what you asked for. And by doing that in a repeated kind of way, you start to build people's understanding of what you can do and that you're somebody that can be trusted to start to try to go beyond just making maps, editing data. Again, not that those things are bad. It's just if you want to break out of, the analyst level type of work that a lot of us are forced to do, you have to really concentrate on what the next step is. And of course, none of this really matters unless you're managing your time like a hawk. That doesn't mean that you have to be like a lawyer billing your time in 6-minute increments, but you have to make sure that you're not getting bogged down in any crazy projects that have no real end in sight. And if you do start to get bogged down, you need to be able to throw up the white flag and say, hey, we're spending a lot of time on this. Is this worth it to you guys? Do you understand how much resources we're investing? It's those kinds of common sense types of things that until you kind of take a step back, sometimes you can get kind of mired in the muck and not realize what's going on until it's too late. One good book that I've come across over the last decade or so is this book called The Trusted Advisor. And it's really designed for consultants, but it applies to anybody that is in a support services kind of role, whether you have real customers that are just the general public that you're selling to, or if you're selling, quote unquote, to your fellow coworkers and stuff. So it's a good little book to look at. Again, just throwing it out there in case you want to do some research on your own after the fact. So the second step, again, to dig a little bit deeper is targeting the right folks and leveraging the tools that you have. And so I broke this into 2 slides because they're the same concept in general, but they really kind of have a different type of aim, right? So every conference you go to, if you're like me, all you hear is you need an executive, champion. You need an executive champion. Maybe you do, but maybe you don't. Maybe you don't have to go after the CEO every time you have any, little idea. That's not to say that the people that are telling you that are wrong. It's just that sometimes it's okay to not go after the whale. Sometimes it's okay to find a fellow fish. And even sometimes it's okay to find a sardine or a guppy. If you are making a real impact to the frontline people that are doing their jobs every day, that are supporting an organization, their bosses are going to see that and they're going to start to seek you out. So you don't necessarily always have to target the folks at the very top. Sometimes you can kind of do a grassroots type of thing where you work your way up. I mean, hey, it works for the drug industry, might as well work for us too, right? So the other part of this, targeting and leveraging, is really using every ounce of software, knowledge, staff power that you have internally before you go and ask for other stuff. Now, that's not to say that it's a bad idea to go and buy new software or get new hardware or whatever. Those things are good things, and a lot of times they're needed. But even if you're just trying to put together a proof of concept, if you've got software on-prem that will do that, use that stuff, because it makes the pitching process or selling process a whole lot easier when you're not asking for a ton of money and staff time. You're just asking for maybe a little bit of money and a whole lot of staff time. The prime example here, again, coming from a GIS perspective, if any of you out there have enterprise agreements with ESRI, you have no idea, unless you really dig into it, how much software, how much support is included in that. You don't have to always go to professional services for help. Sometimes you can talk to regular support, and those guys will work their butts off for you. They're not going to do your projects for you, but they'll point you in the right direction. They'll give you the right, kind of steps towards those resources that you might need, so you can do a lot of that investigative work on your own. You know, dashboards from our, of ArcGIS. Why wouldn't you use that rather than going out and buying some other dashboarding technology, at least at the proof of concept level? So I can't emphasize this enough, that if you have tools, use those first. Only ask for other stuff when you really, really need it. Because if you're talking to executive people, it's a lot easier to get staff time committed rather than new funding. And then the third step here is really, again, like I mentioned earlier, showing the potential benefits of a project. If you're able to tie, there's two different things here, right? So if you're talking about benefits, you need to be able to, number one, tie it to a pain point or some kind of passion that the higher ups have. It's even better if you can tie your projects to those things, as well as initiatives that are in written documents. So, if you're looking at your city or county's comprehensive plan, there are definitely goals that are buried in there that have been adopted by elected officials. Those are things they want to focus on. If you can tie your project, even if it's tangentially to those things, that's a big win in the right direction. That just helps you kind of get the ball rolling that much faster. Now, obviously, the next step to that is, after you go through these kinds of documents, whether they're, again, comprehensive plans or studies or, economic development assessments or whatever it is, if you look through those things and you can't find anything that's really juicy, you can go and start looking at, things like, elected officials' Twitter feeds and stuff, and start to look for what their pain points are. The problem with getting into that, when you start talking about following elected officials, themselves, is that it's very easy for you to kind of focus on or try to tack your projects onto things that are pet projects for folks. And then you start to get wrapped into the whole politics thing. So that's why I'm saying, try to stick to, these comprehensive plans, these studies and stuff that are agreed to by everybody, not just the elected officials, not just one elected official, but all those guys and girls, as well as staff, because those things are built through a collaborative process. So really, those are the three main steps that I really wanted to get across to you guys. And so to reinforce those things, I think it'd be really useful to go through and talk about some examples of the people and the projects and the costs and stuff that we've associated with some of our big ticket things that we've done over the last 10 or so years at Johns Creek. So the first one that I wanted to highlight was our open data portal. And really, the goal here was to build one site that would enable everybody, public, staff, researchers, NGOs, anybody that wanted data from us, one site that everybody could go to. Now, the way to this kind of, I know I'm using an example that targets a pretty high level ranking person, the city manager, but it's a good one to use for this, because something that's this visible, if you've got a project that's that visible, that can touch everybody essentially in a community, not just, internal staff, not just one department, you really need to think of looking for people like that, like the city manager, or like somebody that understands those kinds of intricacies of dealing with the public at large. Again, thankfully, Johns Creek is a smaller city, so getting in front of the city manager isn't like trying to get a meeting with the Pope. It's relatively easy. It might take a week or two to get in front of him or her, but for projects like this, again, it's well worth it. So in terms of how we positioned the open data portal, it wasn't just, hey, this is the new cool thing that everybody in GIS is doing, and it's going to make our lives so much easier. That way, when developers come to do new subdivisions or something in the city, they won't have to bother us. That's not the pitch that you want to make. The pitch that you want to make is, this is all about transparency. It's about showing all the work that the city does. It's about highlighting the departments. It's about showing how much, the tax dollars that we collect really does for citizens in the community. Those are the kinds of things that these types of folks really listen for. Is it going to make us look good? Is it going to reduce the amount of staff time that we're spending, filling out or responding to open records requests and stuff? Those kinds of things are the real benefits, the return on investment. We GIS people know we're going to get all these other things too, but the people that you're talking to, that you're pitching this to, need to understand how it impacts them and the folks that they report to. And of course, as you can probably already tell just by the layout of our open data portal, we're leveraging a whole bunch of different ESRI technologies. We're using our ESRI EA for our enterprise agreement for all the on-prem software, ArcGIS Pro and stuff, where we're able to pull all these data from different databases internally. But we're also using, we started out using Hub Basic. We've since gone up to Hub Advanced for some of the advanced functionality that's available. And of course, we're doing a lot of data hosting and online, just to make sure that when people do access our site, that it's always available. It's not subject to a random power outage at City Hall or some kind of broken ETL process or something on the server that corrupted the data. If you're putting your data, if you're managing a lot of this stuff with commercial tools, it's a lot easier to kind of expand your scope a little bit more than you might normally do. The second kind of big project that we did was building an Alexa skill, which then led to a bunch of other projects. At the time, we didn't know that the Alexa skill was going to be so foundational that it was going to help us build a call center and a web-based chatbot and all these other things. All we knew at the time was, hey, if we built this thing, we would really be able to answer people's questions a lot faster and a lot more accurately. So the goal here was, as opposed to the open data portal, when we're talking to the city manager, the goal here was to go to the web manager and say, hey, Jennifer, that's her name. So shout out to Jennifer, our web manager at Johns Creek. So we went to Jennifer and we said, hey, this is a tool that we could employ that would potentially make it a lot easier for you to maintain the FAQs on our website, and would also, eliminate a lot, or hopefully reduce a lot of the email inquiries that our staff have to respond to. If you can ask a chatbot something that 500 other people have asked it before, and we've programmed it to be able to answer it the exact same way every time, not only does that reduce the amount of different kinds of messaging that you could get based on the staff that you talk to, or happen to get, happen to pick up your call when you call or email or whatever it is. But it also increases the transparency of data, right? So again, kind of like the open data portal, we were thinking this can reduce the amount of staff time that's used, but it can also help increase that transparency level. And that helps our web manager then, when she believes in the project, go to her boss and go to his boss to kind of get the ball rolling a little bit more. Again, it's all about making sure that your projects connect with not just institutional goals, but also departmental goals, individual staff people's goals. If you can make things easier and less intense for them to work on, they're going to be much more willing to jump on board with you. And of course, the interesting thing about the Alexa skill is that while we use a bunch of ESRI tools to support it, that are commercial, kinds of tools that are used by many different organizations, we actually found out about the core part of this as an R&D project that ESRI was working on. So for those of you that don't know, well, let me kind of back up. Everybody knows that ESRI builds software to sell it, right? That's where the whole commercial off-the-shelf term comes from. ESRI also does a lot of open source work, and some of that open source work is, really useful. Well, some of it is, not that, let me rephrase that. It's all useful, but some of it can really make a really big impact rather than, small targeted impacts in organizations. And for us, finding the code that kind of helped us build the skeleton of the Alexa skill was one of those things that was like, oh my goodness, if we use this, we could really expand the use of data throughout the organization. The next big project that we worked on was an augmented reality application for the fire department. So to understand this a little bit, if you kind of picture Johns Creek like a triangle, right? The bottom part of our city is all bordered by the Chattahoochee River, which, again, if you're not familiar with the geography in Atlanta, the Chattahoochee River is a major thing. It's not as big as the Colorado River, but for us, it's a pretty serious river. So along the river, along our border, a lot of people go out and they'll fish or they'll do other recreational stuff in the river. What most people still don't understand, even though we've continually told them and warned them, and the state has also, a ways up the river, there's a big dam that holds back a reservoir that is the main water supply for a lot of the major cities in the area. Every day, or almost every day, that dam opens up and lets a bunch of water, down the Chattahoochee. So you could be out on the Chattahoochee fishing away, not hear the alarms go off, which are, 20 miles upstream. And all of a sudden, over the course of a half an hour, the water level in the Chattahoochee will rise 2 or 3 feet, and it's a lot colder. So the problem that we have is not just people not understanding that and being aware, like, hey, this water is rising, I need to get out of here, but also that when our fire department goes out to respond to these folks, these folks might call in and they have no clue where they are. I'm on the river, there's a lot of trees around. That doesn't really help a fire responder, figure out where you are. And then once they get the boat loaded out there to try to find you, it's hard for the fire guys to figure out where they are in relation to different subdivisions and landmarks that the caller might be telling them. So long explanation to say that we used a application called AUGEO, AUGEO, that was developed by ESRI Labs. And we were able to take a bunch of our data that's hosted in ArcGIS Online, load it into this application, and then stick a night vision camera on the iPad that it's deployed on, set this up on the boat. And basically, if you are out, at dusk or in the dark, which, there's a fair number of people that do that, our fire guys are much easier. It's much easier for them to be able to use this tool that has GIS built into it to try to find where people are and also make sure that they don't lose orientation, with the different landmarks that are around them. So again, that was a very long explanation, but I felt like, understanding the geography is something kind of central to understanding the project. So in terms of pitching this to somebody, we didn't go to the fire chief and say, hey, chief, you've got a million other things that you're working on right now, but we want to talk to you about augmented reality, which he's not going to have any clue what that is, not because he's not a smart guy, but that's not his business. So we went to the guy that actually drives the boat, and said, hey, Captain so-and-so, what do you think about doing this? You guys don't have any maps out there except the ones that you're using on your phone, which are Google Maps, which why would you use Google Maps on the river? Well, you'd only use them if you had nothing else. So we went to that guy, pitched in the idea and said, look, we can build this tool that'll give you this situational awareness. Oh, and also it'll help you be able to look through the fog that's out there and see in the dark. And he was like, hell yes, I want this. Like, why would I not want this? And it's all on an iPad and I can just take it with me when we're out there and load it up on the front of the boat and just use it. So yeah, I mean, it's really one of those things that cost us next to nothing to develop. It was just a matter of taking the different pieces of hardware that we already had, put it together, use this free application that was part of our enterprise agreement, and load some data in, and then, get feedback from the guys. The last big project that I wanted to focus on was our most recent application of building a tree inventory using Survey 123 and also App Studio, and then building some AI tools behind it. So for this application, the goal was to basically help the community, help us build a comprehensive tree inventory that was not just like, hey, there's a tree here, but there's an oak here, and not just any oak, but it's a specific kind of oak. And there's an American holly over here. We wanted to be able to build a really realistic, highly accurate inventory of all the trees, at least that we have in our parks. And then after that, how many people are going to actually take this into their backyards and start to get that data as well, so that we eventually, over time, over years, probably develop again a comprehensive tree inventory that's not just public property, but private property, common areas, anything you can think of. So for this, the person that we targeted was both the arborist that was in our community development department, as well as our parks guys, the guys that actually manage the infrastructure in the parks. And the pitch to them was, hey, yeah, we want to collect this data to help build better maps. So when you guys ask for maps of the parks, they're more accurate. But for you, it'll help you understand what trees are where you can plant new trees. Something that we learned through the process that I thought was really interesting is it's not a good idea to plant a ton of the same kind of trees all in a clump, because if one tree gets infected with some disease or bug or something that impacts that species, it can very easily spread to the entire grove of those trees and take them all out. So knowing those kinds of things and knowing what's planted where and when it was planted and how big it was really makes a big difference. And so that was our pitch to them, hey, help us help you. We'll be able to bring the citizens into this, and we'll make it really easy for everybody to kind of understand the value of trees in the parks, the value of trees in backyards and common areas, like I said. So with this project, it involved leveraging ArcGIS Pro that we already had, the Python API from our, ArcGIS API for Python that we already had, and then just getting a little bit of understanding through some of the developer materials on the ESRI website of how to actually train a model to be able to detect the top 50 trees in the city. So it sounds a lot more complex than it really is, but again, once you start to do these kinds of projects over and over again, you start to build more rapport with not just the staff that you have or the citizens that you have, but also with folks at different software companies, whether it's ESRI or anybody else. Once you start to develop the, like I said, the rapport and the understanding, this mutual understanding, like, hey, you're a software company, you build cool stuff. I'm a government or I'm a whatever customer, and I like to use cool stuff and I'm willing to push the envelope. Other folks will start to gravitate towards you and make those things happen. So those are the main 4 examples that I really wanted to point out. But the main takeaway here, as I mentioned earlier, is that when you're selling GIS or you're pitching your projects, it's really about selling yourself, right? And I don't mean like sell your soul. I mean, you're selling your own capabilities to other people. You're saying, look, you can trust me to do these kinds of projects. You can trust me to try to take on something that might not be what you think is traditional GIS. And I can really take it and make it into something really cool that'll impact a lot of people, right? Working smarter is always a lot cooler than working sexy. I mean, does anybody really care, that, the map might be, have cool little burned edges and a different kind of sepia tone to make it look historical? That might be nice, but really what people are interested in is, what is this going to do for me? And it's the same way, that same concept holds not just for regular maps that we make every day. It also makes sense for big projects that we want to do, every couple of months or every year, or what have you. And again, it's making sure that you're targeting the right folks. You're not always trying to go after, the hardest person. You're not trying to go after the prom king or the prom queen. Sometimes it's okay to just go after, regular folks, just like in the rom-coms, that you already know that are just as cool as you are. You don't have to go after the person everybody thinks is going to be the ultimate decision maker. I guess, and the last thing that I really wanted to have you guys take away, in your minds is that, having an example of what other cities have done can help to pitch your own ideas. And that's why I spent so much time talking about our stuff. It's not to self-promote, but more to say, look, we're a small shop. We can do these kinds of things. If you have 1 or 2 people, there's no reason that you can't do stuff just as cool or even better. Use what you've got to your advantage. Use the fact that you're a small organization and that you're nimble and that you can invest a small amount of money. And if something doesn't work, you can cut it loose and drop it, and nobody knows the difference. If you're a huge organization, yeah, you might have tons of money and you might have tons of resources, but maybe things move slower there. So work with what you've got, stick to it. If you want to do cool stuff, you can do it. And as always, you can always reach out to your fellow people, me or whomever else you might run into. So with that, that's pretty much it. Be more than happy to answer your questions. Hopefully that you got something out of that. If not, then I'm sorry that I wasted half an hour of your time, but I guess we'll find out pretty shortly.
All right. Well, definitely. Thank you, Nick, for great presentation, and we appreciate everybody attended here. I think I saw at the highest audio was like 97 folks on the call. So I want to go ahead and take some Q&A at this moment in time for Nick. And Ollie and I will read off the questions for you, especially to help out those folks that are in the car driving around and just called in on the telephone. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So if you have some questions to answer, put them in the chat window. Ollie, are you here? You want to take the first one, or you want me to do it?
Yeah, no, I can grab it. So we've got a few coming in. So first up, from Tom. So Nick, do you have and update strategic or business plans?
No, we don't. And I know that goes against the grain of everything that, any consultant will ever tell you, but there's a reason for it. So we generally have an idea of what we're going to do at the beginning of the year. We have some goals that are set kind of informally with my boss, the assistant city manager. But there's nothing that's written. There's no like, okay, year 2, we're going to do this. And then year 3, we're going to do that. Those kinds of plans are fantastic if that's what your organization requires. Here's a secret. If they don't require it, stay away from them, because it can I've seen some organizations get locked into, well, year 2 is migrating to ArcGIS Online. We can't do anything but that. So, so again, kind of look at those things a little bit leery, but use them at what they're for. They're a tool to be used to help you do your job, not be a recipe book or a shackle that keeps you where you don't want to be.
Cool. Want to grab the next one, Brian?
Yeah, let's see here. Catherine has one in here. Excuse me. What 3 words is an excellent resource for emergency response to aid in locating people? So I'm not sure. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we've looked into. Definitely what 3 words. There's another company that's just come out recently that appends unique IDs to addresses and to physical locations to kind of develop a history over time, called PlaceKey. So there are a lot of these kinds of tools out there. The biggest problem that we found with them is that, again, it goes back to trying to help the community or help the regular non-GIS person understand how to use them. The coolest thing about what 3 words is that it's easy to use, but the hardest thing is that the 3 words that might describe your 1 meter by 1 meter spot on the ground could be random.
Sure.
So if there are examples out there of people using those in E911 types of scenarios, I'd love to hear them. Because I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah, I think she was making a statement and I read it off as a question, but still,
okay.
there's great information there. So, Ollie?
Sure, yeah. So from Amy, have you ever built a solution that you knew would be a huge win, but people just didn't buy in?
Absolutely. The Alexa skill. When we first started working on that, we had a very, very beta version that was able to say, you could ask it like, who is the city manager of Johns Creek? And it would come back and say, the city manager of Johns Creek is blah, blah, blah. And, which we thought was just awesome, because this was right when chatbots were smart speakers, with chatbots enabled in them, were just starting to come out, right? It was like Alexa was the only one that you could get. And so, I walk into the city manager's office and I'm all proud, look what the team built, and carry this thing in, and I show it to him, and he's eating lunch, and I do this demo for him, and I'm like, what do you think? We could add all these questions and we could do all this stuff. And he looked at me and he goes, well, that's a nice gimmick. And I was like, oh, gimmick? Would we call it a gimmick? So that's what's going on in my mind. So, obviously, yes, we have had those kinds of scenarios where, people, especially the decision makers, didn't buy in. The goal with that kind of thing, or the way that you have to kind of pivot pretty quickly, is, okay, yeah, it is a gimmick, just agree with them, but we're going to build it into this thing that will do cool things. are you okay with us going on that journey? And that thankfully turned him around. And a couple months later, when we repitched him, he was all about it. So, but yeah, it does happen, and it can be soul crushing, but stick with it. It's okay.
Yeah.
And that guy doesn't work for the city anymore, so whatever.
Okay, Catherine's got one here for you. What necessitated your move from Hub Basic to Hub Pro?
So a little primer on Hub Basic versus Hub Pro for those of you that don't know. Hub Basic is included in most people's ESRI enterprise agreement. It basically, Hub itself is the best way I can boil it down is it's a way to build a website, kind of a microsite is what we call it internally, that at Johns Creek, with very low code, if any. And it gives you, some pretty easy widgets out of the box. So you can embed an application, you can, pull in iframes, you can put charts and stuff like that. Hub Pro basically takes all that functionality and adds more stuff to it. So it gives you the ability to build what's called an initiative that people can then follow. And so the way that works is you essentially drag in this advanced widget, which gives people the ability to click on a button, and it asks them to log in either by creating their own ArcGIS Online account, excuse me, or you can use, Facebook and I think Google and a couple other third-party sign-ins. And once somebody does that, every time you update your initiative, they get notifications. So it's kind of like, if you just want to do open data and you don't care about anybody following that effort, Hub Basic is probably fine. If you want people to be able to follow along, get updates, kind of do a lot more engagement, if you're into the engagement side of things, Hub Pro is the way to go. Absolutely.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, from Tim, how do you set aside time to do R&D with a small staff and a growing population?
Really, really good time management. And that's not a pat on my own back, but it's something that we've had to learn. So as I mentioned towards the end of the presentation, it's about making sure that you don't get bogged down in projects that are time sinks. It's about making sure that everybody on your staff, when it's just two people, it's pretty easy, but making sure everybody on your staff understands that, once we get done eating the vegetables, so to speak, we can go on to dessert. So there's a higher motivation to hurry up and get through and deliver really good stuff that doesn't need a bunch of revisions, so that we can have time to work on R&D. So it's really comes down to time management and also building tools to help people help themselves, right? So up front, when you're building web applications or, whatever other kind of tool, dashboards, anything, you want to make sure that those tools, those different applications are going to try to support as many people in your organization as possible, so that they don't have to come to you to ask for questions quite as much. And that's not to eliminate them coming and talking to you. It's just to elevate the kinds of questions that they're asking. So what we try to avoid is somebody coming to us and saying, hey, can you make a sitemap of this one project? Yeah, we can, but that sucks for me and it sucks for you, because you've got to wait a couple hours while I work this in during the day and build it for you. If we can build an application that can help you do that, you don't have to come and spend 5 minutes walking from one side of the building to me and all that jazz. So build applications that help people help themselves, and the rest will fall in line, usually.
Yeah, no, those are definitely good words. Let's see here. Chase has asked a question. When developing the AI for the Tree ID app, did ESRI consult? And if they did, was there any NDA involved? And I'll follow that with a second question is how did you get connected with ESRI Labs?
So ESRI Labs, we didn't really connect with them. So there's ESRI Labs, the team, and then there's the R&D folks that are, so they're two different departments. The R&D people, my understanding, and Adam is on the call, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe not, if he's flying under the radar. The R&D folks are run out of a team in DC, in Washington, DC, and the labs folks are, I think, mostly in Redlands. So they're kind of two different teams. So the labs guys build a lot of things that my understanding, will eventually become a product or are likely to become products, whereas the R&D people are more kind of on the edge of GIS. So the Alexa skill technology is not going to become a product anytime soon from what I've seen, which is why it's more of an R&D type of thing. So that being said, there wasn't a lot of connecting to either one of those guys. It was more of us trying to seek out the right people on the GeoAI team at ESRI to kind of give us a push in the right direction. And there were a few folks that were really, really helpful and generous in giving us a couple hours just to say, okay, this is how you wire this whole thing together. And this example that you found, this is how you could logically implement it. So they helped us kickstart in the right direction. And then, we had to kind of, go from there. So in terms of, an NDA, there wasn't any. Be more than happy to, if people are interested in understanding more about that application, talking to you more about it, after the call, obviously, or whenever.
Yeah, no, that definitely, Adam, you're on the call. That definitely might be something we're interested down the road is talking more about AI in a presentation. But Ollie, is there any other questions?
No, Catherine did put in a link for what 3 words for, I'm guessing this is a first responders example. So
Okay.
if anybody wants to go check that out, I can.
Definitely. Thank you, Catherine.
Just some more thank yous. And Tom says, my understanding is that the Hub Basic is open data only and Pro has targeted initiatives.
That's my understanding as well. But I know that, this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that you don't necessarily have to use ESRI's technology for what it was originally intended for. You can kind of coerce it to do other things. So yeah, Hub Basic is designed, or originally was designed to be open data. That's what it was called initially. But there are other things you can do with it that aren't strictly open data. You can build a little mini website that has nothing to do with data. But yeah.
I have a question, and it's been something that we've been dealing quite a bit with as a company that I work for, and we're trying to achieve a certain level of security, cybersecurity. So I'm real interested to know, with the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, we're trying to adhere to, a level 3 type status on that. With your open portal, and what kind of security measures did you guys follow, or I'll leave it at that. So just curious.
Yeah, so our open data portal is designed to be used by anybody. So we don't have any security per se surrounding it. So my understanding is that ArcGIS Online is built with, all the federal security standards, the US federal security standards, in place and stuff. So in terms of securing the site itself from being, hacked or whatever, we don't have to worry about that because all of our data is hosted. The entire application is hosted. We don't have to worry about going to our IT guys and having them figure those kinds of things out. But all the data that's available for download on our site all has a Creative Commons license on it. That's just a CC BY kind of thing. So anybody can download it. You can use it for whatever purpose. All we ask is that you credit the city for its original creation. So I would imagine that, if there was an organization out there that had a more restrictive policy or more kind of, maybe they're building an open data site that's just an internal kind of thing. I know those types of things exist, but I would not be the best person to talk to about it.
Okay. Very nice. No, thank you for that.
Sure.
Adam actually posted, ESRI has a startup partner that can help with Alexa skills, and he's put a link into the chat window. So if anybody's interested on that, and then we're getting some thank yous here. I guess we got about 6 minutes. If anybody else has any questions, or Nick, if you have any questions for us, really impressed by the presentation, and we really appreciate you taking the time. And it's always a pleasure to have folks from other states present for ESRI Texas. I think we have the winner today is Esther in Kenya is the furthest away. So that's always nice. And any other questions here? If
Yeah, I
not,
think
we'll,
there's one more from
oh, is there?
Tim.
Nice.
Yeah. Have you looked at any other open source geo products?
I have in the past, not in relation to projects at Johns Creek, but I've looked at QGIS and some of the other ones, and they're capable software products. So if you've got things that you need to do, or kind of projects that you want to accomplish that that can be handled by those types of things, then by all means use them. The main limitation I found, two main limitations that I have with open source. And now let me be clear. I love free. Free is awesome. But free comes with some caveats, right? So you have to understand how something works. There's not a company you can go to. There's not a tech support line you could call and say, hey, this thing isn't working. What the heck? So that's why sometimes I try to make sure that people are a little bit leery of just jumping into the, oh, well, ESRI costs too much. I'm just gonna use something open source. Hey, if you want to do the Wild West, yeah, sure, go for it. But yeah, do it, while you're understanding that there's not really any support. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is that, and again, this is not a sales pitch for ESRI, but the integration of different products all into ArcGIS Online and to each other, I think, is where a lot of the value of ESRI's technology comes into play. If you need to publish something to the web, it's much easier using commercial products rather than open source stuff that might make it a little bit harder. I think Liz raised her hand.
Yeah.
My Liz,
you want to unmute her? Ollie?
I'm trying to. She
Trying your best there?
She has to unmute herself.
Liz?
Hey, I just wanted to tell Nick, thank you so much. I appreciate you jumping on and joining us today. I certainly beat the bushes for all my friends in the GIS world and asked them to come and share their stories. So thank you for giving us your time.
You're welcome, caller. Thank you too.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. Well, we got a couple of minutes here. Anything you're working on behind the scenes that you could reveal, or any new technology you're exploring? Or
yeah, we actually just announced a couple of days ago that we are working with a company called Airspace Link. Let me say that again because I totally jumbled it. Airspace Link. They're based out of Detroit. Basically, what they do is they build an integration between commercial drone pilots registering their flights with the FAA. So if you're a commercial drone pilot, or you have a Part 107 license or something, and you want to do some kind of flight, whether it's for money or not, regardless of the fact, the rules are that you need to go to the FAA and get flight authorization ahead of time. These guys build a tool that makes that really easy, but we're also trying to figure out how to get a drone delivery pilot project off the ground. So the idea is, you're out on the golf course, or you're at home, and hey, I want to get some Italian tonight, for the family, but I don't want to go into the traffic because that's crappy. Let me, call it up on my phone and then have a drone come over and drop it off for me. Those things don't exist in the US right now because it's all restricted by law. So anything that you see that's drone delivery is all research kind of projects that the FAA has cleared for very specific purposes. But that's what we're getting ready to do. We're trying to figure out how do we work with Airspace Link to help integrate drone deliveries into the national airspace in a way that's helps rather than annoys the crap out of people. So that's the major project, but it's very very young.
Yeah, I'll
It's
definitely have to look
cool.
at that. Yeah,
Yeah,
Ollie
I
and I are.
actually
Ollie.
found out today that drone delivery is actually very prevalent in Africa already. So so that was a fun little thing I found out today.
Yeah, medical products and stuff. It's pretty cool.
That's really interesting. Yeah, Ollie and I are both leads in the drone programs at our agencies and companies. So interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see here. One last one, and we'll have to call it. Nick, do you have link to the projects you have discussed? That might be
Some-
something we have to send out or put on our website.
Yeah, I can provide that afterwards. We have some pages on our website, on our city website. The data hub you can easily find. It's just datahub.johnscreekga.gov. The Alexa skill, if you go to the Alexa skill store on your phone, you can find it there. Our ways integration stuff there's a page of that on our city's website. So really, go start off on our city's website, which I can put into the chat right now. And you'll find a majority of the projects, listed there.
Okay,
And
well,
we'll make sure to include any of the links that people have shared today in the chat. We'll include that in the email that goes out with the PDH for everybody.
Cool.
okay. Well, hey, we're right at the top of the hour here. Nick, I want to thank you for your time and wonderful presentation and just amazing Q&A session. Thank my co-host, Ollie Powers. I'm Brian King. We both work really hard and volunteer for University of Texas. If you are interested in volunteering, please go to our website and contact us. We're always looking for volunteers. You don't have to live in Texas to be a part of this great community. So definitely let us know, and want to thank our sponsors. We couldn't do a lot of this without them, but stay tuned for next month. We'll be back and for another speaker series. And Nick, you're always welcome to join us and hang out on some of our additional speaker series into the future. But thank you all, and we'll give you back your day. And we appreciate you all taking the time today.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay. The recording will be up on the YouTube channel real soon. Y'all take care.